welcome to Hey, Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Crack Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On today's show, we've got another edition of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of everything that happens in the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights on our Crack Racquets YouTube channel, we break down all the Division I women's action. And this past week saw the start of conference play across the country. It saw multiple spring break trips in action. It delivered us all sorts of fun results to discuss here on today's podcast. And joining me, as always, to break it all down as he does each and every week on this show is a man you know best as the returning champion of returning champions here on our Crack Racquets podcast, the founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, co-host of these Deciding Point episodes, our dear friend, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm feeling somewhat rested after what was a very busy college tennis weekend, tracking all of the Cracked Racquets streams and all of the different avenues in which one can find those streams. So it was a busy weekend, back to normalcy here. It's been a busy few weeks for me personally. So this feels like a more normal week. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to hear it all as well in the personal life of Jay. This is the real breakdown we want to start today's show.
It is. I was in the office for the first time last week since 2020. So It just took a lot out of me. Not used to that.
Yeah. When was the last time you had to put on athletic pants? I feel like going to an office, that's got to be the worst stress, right? Is actually having to get dressed.
Yeah, except when you just wear your joggers to work. That's probably the least interesting thing about going to work at this point.
Okay, that's very, very fair. And again, here on today's show, we're not going to break down Jay's wardrobe. We are going to break down the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world, of course. Before we do any of that, a shout out, as always, to the sponsor that makes this show possible week in, week out. It's our dear friends at Ellesse. Of course, I'm not rocking the Ellesse today. It had to get cleaned at some point in the washing machine as we speak, but truly extraordinarily comfortable. It's starting to turn into spring. You can wear that hoodie outdoors. You can play tennis in it, go for a run in it, do all the things you like to do as winter turns to spring, and you're going to look fashionable doing it as well. Shout out to our friends at Ellesse for their support of this show. To learn more about the catalog of items they provide, click on the link in the description to this podcast. Shout out to our dear friends at Ellesse. All right. As always, the plan for today's show: break down the past week, look ahead at break down our Crack Racquets top 10 rankings, the latest edition of the ITA rankings as well. But of course, every so often, we're handed some breaking news in the college tennis world, and we'd like to start with that news here on today's show. Of course, the big announcement in the college tennis world is the announcement of the Universal Tennis National Intercollegiate Tennis Championships, an event coming this May for the first time. Of course, I'm going to read directly from the Universal Tennis readout. Universal Tennis announcing the first ever Universal Tennis National Intercollegiate Tennis Championships for college teams to participate in a postseason competition from May 17th to May 20th. That's a key detail. May 17th to May 20th in Atlanta, Georgia. All matches will be aired on Amazon Prime Video. The NIT Championships will allow men's and women's teams to gain valuable postseason experience. 8 teams will be selected to participate in this year's event by the NIT Tournament Committee, with the team's UTR Power 6 ranking among the top criteria for consideration. That's the readout we were offered by Universal Tennis. Jay, curious your reaction to this event, what else you know as it relates to what the field might look like.
Well, my initial reaction was surprise and intrigue. Was really the two thoughts I had when I saw this announcement. And a little bit of I definitely called this. You can go back on the Twitter feed talking about the opportunity to have college tennis on Prime Video, given Universal Tennis's relationship with Prime. But holistically, what we know about this field, a lot of speculation today. It's essentially going to be teams that are not selected for the NCAA tournament. So we talk often On this show, Chris Hallior is probably the expert in this field around whether or not you make the cut, right? What is that cut line? Somewhere around 40, kind of typically in the ITA rankings. So this field will be comprised of teams who don't make the NCAA teams. They're not competing in the round of 64. They're not going to a regional host. You mentioned the dates. The dates completely overlap with the NCAA team event, all the way down to the fact that the women play on May 17th, followed by men and women combined, quarterfinals through finals, all the way through 20th. That was another huge takeaway of this. But overall, I mean, the amount of stuff that Universal Tennis has launched in the college tennis realm just since January, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, they've, reinstated the 100K, herd grant for new college tennis players who are making it on the pro tour. They've announced a match with USC men and Pepperdine men at Indian Wells. They've announced 2024 Australian Open College Tennis Showcase. They just announced the UTCA, this kind of college tennis coach advisory committee. And now we're announcing college tennis on Prime for this, intercollegiate championship. So overall, just overwhelmed with the amount of college tennis news that is coming from Universal Tennis. And I'm really interested to see how it plays out, but you can't be excited that we're getting more coverage of college tennis on different platforms.
Can't be anything but excited, right?
Anything but excited. I am excited about it.
Yeah, exactly. You said can't be excited. I was like, wait a second. No, I disagree. You can't be excited.
You can be excited. Yes.
Yeah, no, a lot of things there to follow up on. I want to start, though, with your broader theme, if I may speculate as to what it was, which is the 30,000-foot view. How is this anything but good for college tennis, the investment being made by Universal Tennis through all of these different avenues? And obviously, the ITA has adopted the World Tennis Number moving forwards. And look, World Tennis Number is a UTR equivalent in terms of trying to find a rating system as opposed to a straight up ranking based on results to try and monitor the level of everyone, regardless of what level that you're playing at. Still, like, again, to have another national collegiate event that will receive Amazon Prime spotlight, that's fantastic for college tennis. There are a lot of committees in college tennis, but for Universal Tennis to put together another one of really sharp minds, Adam Schachterly and Audra Cohen, two of the names that pop into my head that I believe are serving on the committee. Those are two of the brightest and most innovative young minds you will find amongst coaches in all of college tennis. So to put them together on anything to try and propel college tennis moving forward, that's a win for the sport. Again, 30,000-foot view, I think it's impossible to be anything but excited. Do I wish they picked a different date? Absolutely, because I think you put this event in the fall instead of the spring. Boy, how awesome would that be to get one look at, if you want to go by UTR based on the fall results, whatever it may be, so be it, the selection criteria, but some facsimile of top 8 teams coming together right before the spring season starts and we see them all go head to head. Boy, that would be a really fun event that we don't currently have on the college tennis calendar. And look, there's an NIT. Shout out to UTR, Universal Tennis, for sticking with the NIT theme, an allusion to college basketball. There's an NIT tournament for National Invitationals, what it stands for teams that don't make March Madness, the NCAA tournament in college basketball. This is somewhat an equivalent of that, and I like the spirit, the ethos of providing more competitive opportunities. I hate that it overlaps with the final weekend of NCAAs. Like, I don't like that. If it was the Sunday to Wednesday before, I think that would be awesome. I think you want to try and get teams that lose early in the NCAA tournament competing in this event. I don't think that's unkosher. I think that's totally fine as well. I just don't like the overlap. Like, I get that these players can travel to individuals, but I don't like that these are two really fun competing events happening at the same time.
So I agree on the fall event. I would be surprised at this rate if we don't see a very similar fall event to what you just talked about. I think the fall in particular is ripe for opportunity, right? Yeah. And the ability, and I mean, previously the ITA even used UTR ratings for the seedings in their fall event. So, I mean, the fall is ready to kind of be disrupted. And I think universal tennis could have a lot of opportunity there, particularly with, the inroads they're making with Prime. But what's your pushback on the overlap? Is it purely from a fan perspective? Because overall, these are teams who don't make the NCAA tournament. This year in particular, there's a day off between the Saturday finals of the team event in NCAAs and the individual starting on Monday. So for teams that compete in this event, if they have players who are eligible to play in individuals, they have a baked-in travel day, Atlanta to Orlando, not that far. I think that was strategically chosen. What's your pushback on the overlap?
It's the wherewithal for fans to follow both events throughout the course of the weekend. And I know that only overlaps, 3 of the 4 days are overlap, not all of them. But
Every single day is an
oh,
overlap.
it's all overlap. Okay. So again, I think that matters. Like that's the sort of thing where I would prefer, if possible, put it the week, again, round of 16, there are fewer matches. There are only 16 matches. If you want to do it that weekend instead, I'm fine with that because the bandwidth of a college tennis fan, you're kind of watching everything that weekend anyways. But I just think the NCAA again, the NIT doesn't go up against the Final Four. Like, I just don't like the idea. I don't like is the wrong word. I just think this National Intercollegiate Tournament would be better placed elsewhere in the calendar. That way, college tennis fans can glorify it, can offer it a center stage in a way that it just never will have. Because, again, if you're a college tennis fan, sure, you can pull up both links. But I always say when you're watching multiple matches, you're not watching any matches. And I just think push comes to shove, you have the choice. Do I pull up the NCAA quarterfinals or do I pull up this really cool NIT event? I'm probably pulling up the quarterfinals.
If the quarterfinals is easy to pull up.
Yeah, that's more news on that. More news on that.
But I think that's the big thing, right? I think one of this coming is the announcement of this Prime relationship, right? And the accessibility that has is above and beyond what we had last year for NCAAs in terms of accessibility. So we have not heard any news yet on whether the NCAAs will be televised, if it will be on streaming platforms. None of that has been released publicly. And so at this point in time, it might be way easier for a fan to pull up Prime Video. I understand from a fan perspective, and I think it would be easier for us as fans and pontificators to elevate this event if it was not directly competing. Absolutely. But I do think that in terms of making this an attractive offering for both coaches, players, and teams overall, this is the best time for it to be because most players are out of school, right? They do want some competitive time prior to playing individuals. Like, I understand it from that regard, but it reads quite bold from Universal Tennis for sure to host it the exact same days.
I agree. Again, 30,000 foot view. It's great to have college tennis on Amazon Prime. Now, I will say, a little tease here, no NCAA announcement yet. That's the key word. No announcement yet on what the broadcast is going to look like, but I think there might be some news on that soon. And hopefully we here at Cracked Racquets will be able to share it when that announcement comes forward. That is what we in the business call a tease. But no, I mean, again, it's a fascinating event. I love the concept. I texted you within 3 minutes of the tweet being sent to you and Chris. We had the group chat going, and I had to send some messages to a few coaches as well. How can you be anything but positive about this? Another national event for college tennis to have a spotlight shined on it. I do think that's a good thing moving forward. But enough on this inaugural event that we will see in May. Of course, plenty of fun teams will be competing in that, but all of them currently want to be competing for the NCAA tournament. And as the calendar turns to March, we head towards conference play. We get to the meat of the schedule. Things really begin to heat up. And with all of that in mind, let's turn now to some of the matches that happened over the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world. Let's start with Pepperdine, a team that we have discussed throughout the course of this season. They just hadn't played a ton of matches coming into the weekend. And obviously, they were supposed to have a really big weekend. They were supposed to play, Stanford and Cal a couple of weeks ago. It gets rained out right prior to the national indoors. And, again, coming into the weekend, they'd played a total of 7 matches through 2 months. That's nothing, obviously, in terms of the big picture. But look, we said it at the start of the season. Coach Per Nilsson has always scheduled aggressively. That was continued to be the case, this season. He had two big matches, Saturday, Sunday this weekend, as they took on Michigan and Oklahoma State back-to-back at home. Back-to-back victories for the Pepperdine Waves, 4-0, 4-1. And prior to our show beginning today, I told Jay I was coming in spicy. I told him I was locked in. I had a take for him. Jay, I need you to talk me out of thinking Savannah Broadus is the best player in the country. Because when you look at this Pepperdine squad, what they were able to accomplish over the course of the weekend, again, 4-0 over Michigan, 4-1 over Oklahoma State. First of all, match against Michigan was far closer than that. And we'll break that down in a second. But this is where we have to start, because you look for Savannah Broadus. 0-4 over Lily Jones of Michigan. She gets a 1-3 win over Alana Wolfberg of Oklahoma State. She and Chen go 2-0 in the doubles at the number 1 spot. And Savannah Broadus remains undefeated on the season. I think certainly she's in, if not leading, the most valuable point conversation in the country. But after watching her play this weekend, straight up, Jay, try and tell me she's not the best player in the country right now.
Well, is she even the best player on her team? I mean, she's playing 3. I had this similar thought where I almost feel like they have a Savannah Broadus problem, because it's like, well, what do? You move her up to 2, up to 1. Like, how far do you keep moving her up? Because the problem is the people in front of her, especially Lisa Czar, isn't really losing, right? Janice Chen can have some off days at number 1, and also at number 1, it's a little bit tougher. But I mean, and then I went to look to see how low she's ranked in the ITA rankings to make sure she gets in the NCAA tournament this year. I don't think that will be a concern, thankfully, unlike last year where she wasn't able to play, nor was Janice Chen. Look, she's playing awesome. I don't know if she's lost a set. She certainly hasn't lost a match, like you mentioned, but she's rolling through these matches, right? Hardly dropping games in her matches against, UCF, and then this weekend here in Malibu. There's not much more to say. I mean, she was a player that we all circled as having a sophomore surge. I'd argue it's really just a improvement from her freshman year campaign, which was stellar as well. Look, she's an excellent player.
It's the eye test. She just has the athleticism. She has the weapons. She plays big in the biggest moments. Like, she also has the physicality to extend rallies if need be. But, it's funny because, to your point, it's a burden and a blessing. Is it actually a Savannah Broadus problem?
No, it's a high class problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're being a little facetious there. Lisa Czar had no business winning the first set against Julia Fliegner. Julia served for it or had set points, I believe, in 3 different games down the home stretch of that set. Czar takes the first 7-6 now. That match had 3 hours, 3 sets written all over it even before the start. It looked like it was heading that way. Same deal for her against, I forget who she played against Oklahoma State the next day. She played
Pair.
She played Pair. Thank you. She's up a set in 3 all, 7-6 there, another 2-hour fest. Lisa Czar is going to do her thing. Yeah. Lisa Czar is never losing in less than 2.5 hours, and that's if she loses. Usually she wins. Janice Chen was down match points to Kari Miller. She's up 5-2 in the third when that match finishes. She gets a straight set win over Novak against Oklahoma State. Both of those players are exceptional. But, I don't know. I don't know how you don't play Savannah at 1. It's an eye test thing. The serve and the forehand for Chen are ridiculous. The physicality for Czar's out of this planet. And I just think Broadus can do all of it. And it's if they wanted to just do a little hockey switch and move Broadus up to 1, Chen down to 2, Czar down to 3, I'd have no problem with it. I just it's an eye. Again, it has nothing to do with slighting Chen and Czar. It has everything to do when I watch Savannah Broadus, she's just playing at a different level than her opponents right now.
Yeah, and the results prove that. I do think one thing I've noticed in her level is I find her a lot more consistent this season than she was last season. And either it's the athleticism and the fitness that's paying off, and so she feels like she can stay in these points longer. Just a lot less loose errors. Maybe that's practicing with Lisa Czar for a season. That'll show you not to miss. But yeah, I mean, she's really rounding out her game. It's not just those big weapons, but it's the ability to stay in these points and also be consistent when needed. Yeah, I'd like to see her move up. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, I also think on the flip side, bottom half of the lineup looked really good. Obviously, Tim Chaiwat gets the clinching victory from a set down against Serdan against Michigan. Redelic, I mean, she should have beaten Mesa Chirito up a set in 5-2. Now, Gala was so good down the home stretch of that match. I actually thought I don't think Nikki played poorly. Like, did she get a little tight? Yeah. But Gala was ripping from the baseline. Like, I thought it had, and moving forward, hitting overheads. Like, she worked her way back into that match. Reddick didn't let it go. But Reddick, it bounces back, gets a win over Oklahoma State the next day. Her and Campana 2-0 in the weekend at the number 3 double spot. That was a major issue for Pepperdine in what was only 7 matches through the first 2 months. But it was an issue through 7 matches. Like, this team's rounding into form. And that's the scary part, right? Is you still feel like they're probably not at their best.
I feels like this is their best. I think
Tim Chiwat and Campana singles wise, Campana gets a good win over Mary Kelly. Obviously, Michigan without Jaden Brown. We'll get there in a second. But like, I don't think Tim Chiwat's playing her best yet. Like, I still think those 2 pieces are the pieces that takes this team over the top.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Chiwat is more of a question mark than you would expect right now at number 4 for sure. But the problem is they only have 6 players. These 6 players is the 6 that we're talking about.
Okay.
That's it, right? Caroline Campagna not playing right now. Not sure if she's out for the entire season, but that's tough, right? And they still have more of a gauntlet to go through, as you mentioned. Pairs schedule's tough as he needs to, being in the West Coast Conference. So we'll see how that holds up, right? Any nicks or things like that will derail them.
Yeah, well said. Now, of course, on the flip side, Michigan goes 1-1 on their trip. They get a 4-3 win over Cal. They drop this match to Pepperdine, play the singles without Jaden Brown, obviously, which, again, you could tell her shoulder was heavily taped during the doubles. Still, I mean, Julia Fleetner's proven she's top 3 good. And obviously, I'm a little biased there, so I'll let you talk about that. This team has real depth, though, as well. Like, Serdan's playing 3 sets against everyone. Honestly, I feel like Mesa-Chirito's down is setting a break in every match she plays, ultimately to win in 3 sets. Like, she's a gamer. Lily Jones, for a freshman, has been really good, although you do wonder, month 3, is this maybe where we see a little bit of a slump just with everything that adds up? If Michigan's healthy, they're top 8 good.
Yeah, I came away feeling better about this Michigan team after that match, even though they lost 4-0, than I did coming into the weekend. And the reason is, yes, they were without Jaden Brown, their top singles player. They have a lot of fight in this team. I think, that was a weird match. I mean, Pepperdine could have won that match in almost 45 minutes, but Michigan held on, right? But then in the places that they did have leads, like Kari Miller having match points against Janice Chen, those fell through the cracks. But overall, I was impressed. I was impressed with Kari Miller even being in that position with Janice Chen. Julia Fleegner has clearly taken a big leap from last season to this season, can compete with anyone in the top 3 position. I think she was my MVP at indoors for the number 3 position. So they have a lot of talent. And the bottom of the lineup is looking good. I was really impressed with Gala's fight at number 5, just to keep the match alive, right? And split that second set, continue to put the pressure on. The 4-3 win over Cal is not aging well. They probably wanted to win that match a little more decisively, but this is one of their first weekends outdoors. So I was impressed with what Michigan did against Pepperdine.
That's why they get the mulligan for the Cal match. You win it. Like, that's what matters for this Michigan team. You look for Oklahoma State, big weekend going to Texas. They're 7-4 overall, but their 4 losses are Michigan, Ohio State, and Pepperdine. 4 top 10 losses. I don't hold it against them now. Again, are they going to be top 8? Maybe not. Obviously, I think they will be very, very close, though. Certainly in that top 16 conversation. And again, I think they're going to have a pretty solid Big 12 season. Any Oklahoma State thoughts you want to get out?
Well, I think they're almost like the Baylor equivalent on the men's side in that I think they might have scheduled, they did schedule very aggressively. And, whether that's because of injuries, as they just don't really are fielding the team they might thought they were fielding when they made this schedule. So I think there's a ways to go. I mean, let's not forget next year, NCAA is at Oklahoma State. You have to expect they'll be very much looking forward to a top 8 seed there. So they've got a ways to go to be top 8.
The key is be top 16 so that you're hosting a kickoff weekend next year. You get to the national indoors. It
Yep.
just makes everything that much more likely as you are hosting NCAAs. But again, you look for this team now. They've got the Big 12 schedule ahead of them. So we'll certainly learn more about them. All right, that's enough with the Pepperdine West Coast swing of things. But let's stay on your side of the country, Jay, because Washington has proven their top 16 good. And obviously, Washington got the massive 4-3 victory over Vanderbilt at the National Indoors. Now they sweep the California schools, UCLA, USC, who both come to Washington, both drop matches at the Nordstrom Tennis Center for UCLA. They drop a match 4-3 for USC. Washington gets them 5-2. Let's start with the glass half full. I mean, again, like, credit to this Washington team with the wins they've accumulated. I'm pretty sure they're number 25 right now in the rankings, but if they run the table in the Pac-12, like, they're in the top 16 conversation, Jay. I mean, like, outside of Stanford, I'm saying if they beat everyone but Stanford.
They have to beat Stanford to be top 16. There's
You think
just not
so?
enough. They're the second highest ranked team in the Pac-12 right now.
Yeah.
There's no points to gather in the Pac-12 to be top 16, and these other conferences just have so much room to improve, and we're talking 9 wins deep. So that's the unfortunate part for Washington. The plus side is that they just swept the LA schools for the first time since 2003, right? This is their 4th win against these respective programs in program history. So look, things are on the upswing for Washington. It always helps when UCLA and USC come to town and you get to play them indoors. Those are 2 teams that didn't even make the indoor tournament. Not a lot of indoor tennis reps for them. So great wins for Washington. Top 16 feels like a stretch, but certainly solidifying themselves as a top 25 team and also holding on to that ranking. We saw them peak last year early in the season when they did qualify for indoors, upsetting UCLA at home there. Then they kind of faltered off, right? And you kind of saw them dip back down through the ranking. So I think holding on to a top 25 ranking throughout the rest of the season would be a big win for the Huskies.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think their transfers are playing extraordinarily well. You look
Yeah.
at, Jennifer Kerr, who gets a win over Vagramov, and then, also gets a win over Naomi Chung. Saker gets a win over Charney, as well as a victory over Lukemeyer. Between those veterans, obviously, Sato and Forden are still playing well at the top 2 spots, even if they got a little bit dinged up this past weekend. But they have real depth. Like, they have real options everywhere in their lineup. Haven't gotten to see this team play in person. They also have that it factor. Like, this team really believes in that they are as good as any of these other Pac-12 foes. And maybe now we wish we would have seen Washington Stanford at the National Indoors. Get a little sneak preview of that match. Obviously, we did not. But look, on the flip side, let's start. We have to start with UCLA. Here's the real thing, Jay. They're 4-3 right now. Losses Iowa State, FIU, now at Washington. They've played 7 matches through 2 months, and it's like, yes, they have a non-conference against Ohio State. They've got a non-conference versus UC Santa Barbara, a non-conference versus Pepperdine. Then the Pac-12 schedule, like, there are not a ton of matches on the calendar for this UCLA team, and you look for UCLA now following this loss coming out of the weekend. They're currently ranked number 64. Like, the margins are thin for the Bruins moving forward, Jay.
Well, it's criminal scheduling, right? Because this is a team that lost matches last year due to COVID, right? They didn't have their Stanford and Cal swing. I think they missed another swing as well. You're also starting a team that is very young, right?
Yeah.
You have a number 1 play. You have 2 freshmen starting in that lineup. You have multiple sophomores in that lineup. You have a Vagramov who's really struggling as your one, more experienced player. Like, why are you not using all of your potential dates possible? It doesn't really make any sense why they wouldn't schedule more matches, even if they are just reps. And also at this point, now you have to be worried about the 500 rule, let alone the ranking. Like, let's say maybe other teams in the Pac-12 start to get better. You bank a winner here or 2 over a Washington, over an Arizona State. Like, where are the other wins coming from? They're in deep trouble.
They have to win Cal at home. They have to win at Arizona State. Like, and those are 2 really tricky matches, and they have to win them now at this point. And, like, again, they're on the road at USC. They're at home for USC, so they get them twice. They're playing Pepperdine at home as well. I mean, top 16 is probably out of the question unless even if you sweep everything. But like, oh man, like, I mean, do they have to go 2-1 in those matches? At least 1-2 to get into the tournament, maybe, Jay? Like, I don't like, again, of those 5 matches and they play Ohio State at home as well, but I'm not even qualifying that one right now for UCLA. Of the 2 USCs, Stanford at home, Cal at home, at Arizona State. Does this team have to go 3-2 in those matches?
I was just thinking if they get to go 3-2 and they'll be tournament eligible.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
To get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And that's not easy. Like,
No.
you can't just pencil in the at Arizona State. You can't pencil in the home against USC or Cal. And like, boy, it's urgent. It's now. And you mentioned it. That's the real thing when I look at this UCLA team. I still like the core. It's a really young group. They didn't get to play a full schedule last year because COVID really threw off their year. It wouldn't shock me if we see a wave of doubleheaders coming on the schedule. If they look and they say, hey, San Diego, any of the UC schools, whatever it may be, do you guys have any? San Diego's a tough ask, but any of these teams, like, do you have dates remaining? Because, yeah, they need to play more matches, Jay.
And yeah, so, they don't even need to do double headers. They could just do one match. They've got so many dates remaining, it looks like.
Yeah, very true. On the flip side, USC, 7-3 overall. 4-3 loss to Notre Dame, 6-1 loss at Texas, 5-2 loss at Washington. Like, again, you look for this USC team, they're currently inside the NCAA tournament cutoff line. They're sitting at 36, and I honestly think they're fine there. You know, they've got Pepperdine coming up this weekend, UCLA at home still. Stanford's going to be at home for them. They're also at Arizona State. You know, it's the same schedule, obviously, them and UCLA travel partners. I mean, you look for this USC team, even this past weekend, Sieg got a win over Sato, but like, looking at the stats for this team, I mean, Aaron Cayetano has struggled a little bit this season, especially in comparison to last year. Cayetano 4-4 overall in dual match play. Naomi Chung just still not her healthiest. She's 1-3 overall. Snow Han, after the massive summer, she's 3-4 in dual match play. Like, you know, Maddie Sieg has been that good. She's 7-0, I believe, or still undefeated, at least in dual match play. I don't know. Where are you with the Trojans?
Yeah, I mean, you look at both of these teams and just immense talent across both of these teams. It's really just it's a question mark, right, of why they're having these struggles. For USC, I mean, these are all players that we're familiar with, right? Cayetano, Snow Han, now healthy. You know, Naomi Chung back in the lineup, and you have, you know, Emma Charney, who had a solid fall. It's kind of inexplicable, right? The results that they continue to have. And we saw similar dips for this team last year as well. I don't know what to make of, you know, USC and UCLA right now, but it's not good in LA.
Yeah, again, plenty of talent there. It needs to get going right now for both of these teams. And again, Pepperdine's, UCLA's, Stanford's, Cal's on the horizon. Yeah, it's going to get rocking and rolling in LA. We'll keep our eyes on it as things develop. All right. Again, you look across the board. I do think let's stay in the Pac-12 because, again, what to make of this conference? Utah knocks off Cal, and obviously that's a home match for Utah. Really good win in Salt Lake City. Utah takes the doubles point. They get wins at the 4, 5, and 6 spots, Jay. I mean, again, like, you look for Cal right now, they are currently sitting all the way down. I think they're, at number 54. So that's outside the tournament cutoff line. Utah currently sitting at number 44. They're right around where that cutoff will be. Cal is clearly not healthy. You can see it if you watch them play on the streams. Everyone's got certain tape. Katja Wiersholm's still clearly not at 100% either. But, like, again, it's just running out of time. It's March, and we're still saying these things about Cal.
Yeah, I mean, Cal has been sort of a train wreck the entire season. But I mean, glass half full, right? You know, Utah getting their first program win over Cal. They did the same thing last year with USC, so they're starting to make inroads in the Pac-12. So you love seeing that. You love seeing these conferences become more competitive in that regard. But this is also a Utah team that lost to a Minnesota team that has 4 players. So it's much more of an indication on just the struggles that Cal has, right, playing indoors for, I believe, the first time this season. It's tough. Yeah, they're not healthy. I think that at least you can hang your hat on a little bit versus some of the other LA teams that we were talking about. Like those are at full health pretty much. I mean, yes, everyone has
Nicks and
is
bruises, of course. Yeah.
exactly, but like Cal's missing players.
Yeah.
So that hurts them more. But yeah, I mean, how about those rankings that you mentioned for Cal, UCLA, USC, it's
Striking.
striking.
Yes, absolutely. And again, Cal's 4-5 overall in the year. That's crazy to think. Now, to your point, shout out to Utah. First win in program history over Cal. To your point, got it over USC as well. Going to Utah is just a tricky place to play. That's what we continue to learn, men's or women's side. So shout out to the Utes on the big victory. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the ACC numbers as we were doing our ACC broadcasts, and there's like, I think it's like 9 teams in the top 30 for the ACC. At least there was last week. Yeah, like again, right now you look in the top 25 right now, only Stanford and Washington for the Pac-12. That's
Yep.
it. Stanford at 14, Washington at 25. To find your next Pac-12 team, it's USC at 36,
Yep.
Utah at 44. That's it. And like again, for Cal, 4-3 loss to Michigan, 4-3 loss to Utah. They salvaged the weekend with a 4-3 win over a frisky Colorado team as well. Like, we'll keep our eyes on everything happening in the West Coast over the course of the next week. But with that said, let's move on to a couple of conferences we had the opportunity to watch up close here at Cracked Racquets. SEC, ACC conference play getting underway. Things mostly stayed to script in the first weekend of conference play. Let's start with the number 2 team in the country real quick, because I got the chance to watch them closely. Texas A&M, 5-2 win. That was a battle against Florida, and they also get the 4-1 win over South Carolina, but I want to focus on that Friday match in particular. Texas A&M gets the win, and we can talk about them in a second. I'm buying some stock in Florida, Jay. I really liked what I saw from the Gators. Their freshmen can play, and again, Vilas, a really good 2-0 win over Kupris. I even thought across the board, like Spey, Dudney, Dahlstrom, Briggs, they just fight. Like, they are going to scrap everywhere. I learned a lot about this Florida team. I thought they played well in a tight loss.
I mean, we saw this before, right? This is what the second
Sure.
round of indoors where they played this A&M team tight. It seems to be a theme with A&M where it feels like these matches get close and then they start to run away with it. You saw that both in the Florida match and in the South Carolina match. Yeah, I mean, I think that the current ranking of Florida, like in that 16 through 20 range, is right. And they're like a frisky, second round opponent that you don't want having to come to you in the round of 32. But we'll see. There's just not a lot of like top end talent anchoring the top of that lineup, which makes it tough to compete with the Texas A&Ms of the world.
I'm very excited to watch Florida play the Tennessees of the world. I'm very excited to watch them play
Yeah.
the Vanderbilts of the world. Here's what I mean. I just think Florida could be a top 16 team. Now, you're right. It's going to be closer to 15 or 16 than it would be to 10. But I see it now because they're going to fight really hard. And if they get you on the right day outdoors, I mean, again, they're just going to wear you down. On the A&M note, I just would like to say that I'm buying all the JC Goldsmith stock because I think Goldsmith's play, and obviously she's playing at 5 this year, which is a position she's out of position. She should be cleaning up at the bottom of the lineup, but she gave D'Oliveira the business, and when she's winning this year, she's just blitzing people off the court. And I'm just saying, Stoyana at 1 played a couple of battles in her 2 matches. She's going to get the battles all week, taking on Briggs, Ackley. Again, Brandstein has obviously the big weapons as well, but Goldsmith, the 2-1 win on day 1. She plays 4 against South Carolina, gets a 1-6 win against Ellesse Mills. I'm just saying, I see what JC Goldsmith's up to this year, Jay.
Yeah, that's like, I'm going all in on Amazon and Google right now. It's like, okay, yeah, the time to buy there was like 20 years ago.
Well,
We
I'm
were
just
talking
saying
about
it's the final year. Let's
a fifth
appreciate
year senior.
Let's
Yeah.
appreciate the victory lap.
Yeah, I think it's their best point for sure in singles, right? Cooper seems very up and down. So I think it's plausible that we see a Goldsmith at 4, but I think whoever's anchoring that 4 or 5 spot for them is going to be really tough to beat, particularly outdoors. Yeah, Goldsmith has looked awesome. And she righted the indoors ship that
Yeah.
she's had previously. She played great indoors. She's playing great now. She's a luxury at having at 5.
Yeah, it's more just, yeah, again, the idea of, watching last year's team, Makarova, Stoyana were the two I really had my eyes on, just like, oh, okay, again, they had like 2 losses between them. Not that Goldsmith lost a bunch last year, but I'm just saying, I got the chance to actually appreciate, be like, oh my God, she is just blitzing. Again, De Oliveira, yesterday or on Friday, and maybe it went underappreciated under the years. So shout out to you, JC Goldsmith. Yes, I'm buying the Apple stock here in 2023. That's funny, but no, I mean, again, I will say also, to watch Florida celebrate the doubles point as if they had just won the national championship was something. That was interesting. Again, it was a really fun match. Good start for A&M on the weekend. The other one that caught my eye, Auburn 4-3 over Alabama. I just think Auburn's going to play a ton of 4-3 matches this year, Jay. I just think that's in their DNA.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they don't have a lock at any position there, right? And they're gonna fight to have to get those 3 or 4 singles positions if they drop doubles. I think that they're probably going to take some hits as it comes to other SEC teams. I don't think they're yet in that top 10 conversation, despite what their ranking says, but they are a team that will compete extremely well, and that will win them a lot of matches.
Yeah, 11-2 overall. They've got the Mississippis coming to town here this weekend, so we'll keep our eye on Auburn. Those are really the big SEC results that stood out to me. Florida, a good win over LSU. I thought, last week we had the LSU conversation. They lost a heartbreaker 4-3 to South Carolina on Friday. You're just wrong, Jay. LSU is tournament good. I'm not saying they're going to win a bunch at the tournament. I think they're getting into the tournament, though.
Yeah, the NIT.
Good. It's good. Yeah, that's really all I got from conference play. Everyone kind of did their thing on the SEC side. On the ACC, let's start with Wake Forest. 5-2 win over Clemson, and then a really impressive 4-2 win over Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, tough weekend. 4-2 loss to Wake. 4-3 loss to NC State. I mean, again, shout out to Wake. Good weekend for the Demon Deacons.
Yeah, a quietly good weekend for them. I think, losing both the Campagna sisters to Pepperdine felt like a big blow, and they've been able to make up for it, right? To get that win over Georgia Tech, a Georgia Tech that was just coming off of that weekend, beating teams like a Notre Dame. So, they're in the hunt, right? They're in that, top 25, top 32 conversation where they typically reside. So a good weekend for them, an impressive win over Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I just think for this Wake Forest team, watching them play, I thought Bryland played really well. Killingsworth played really well. It's a lot of experience across the board for this Wake Forest team. Do I think they're top 16 good? No. Do I want to see them in round 1 or 2 of the NCAA tournament? Absolutely not, because it is a deep, experienced team that plays very good doubles as well. And that was a really fun doubles point between them and Georgia Tech. Notre Dame 0-2 on the weekend. Now they had to play the Tobacco Road duo. Always tough when you got to travel to Duke, to North Carolina. But, again, I suppose that felt relevant. I also think it's worth noting Syracuse, they played the Virginia teams. They drop the match to Virginia. They do bounce back, though, with the win over Virginia Tech. So I think they are really, they're clearly in that NCAA tournament hunt. And I think I think that was a good consolidated weekend because it was 4-2 against Virginia. They played pretty solidly. Any thoughts on some scattered ACC results there?
I thought the Notre Dame results were disappointing. I mean, it's a Notre Dame team that had surged to top 15 in the rankings. Yeah. Clearly not a top 15 team. Yes, you need to play North Carolina and Duke a lot closer to kind of warrant that ranking. But you're right. I mean, Syracuse, yeah, absolutely a NCAA tournament team, certainly potentially stay in the top 25 conversation for this team. I thought they played Virginia decently close. But yeah, other than that, nothing super noticeable from the ACC.
My last would be a Duke take. Still no Drummy, but Bryzgalova looks better. Schvetz is looking better. Jackson is legitimately this good. Duke is rolling. Or not rolling. That's too much, but they're getting better. Like they actually are already getting better.
Yeah, Bryzgalova is not looking better.
I thought
I
she
don't
played pretty
even think
well. She got the win. I mean, we watched her match against a Louisville team that they kind of blitzed everywhere, but I thought she
because I
played
was
pretty
going to say
solid.
they've put Schvetz in there
Yeah,
ahead of her, it seems. Yeah, Cam Mora kind of struggling at the two position.
sure.
I'll be curious to see when Drummy is healthy and kind of what the permutation of Drummy, Jackson, Mora ends up looking like. They're starting to drop that number two position more often than they have certainly in the past, right? They were basically undefeated at number two.
Yeah,
So
but Beck just does that at one now.
well, they had Drummy doing it last year,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
true.
whoever they, I don't think they were undefeated at two. It was either Beck or Drummy.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair. I mean, either way. By the way, is Beck if we're doing the her race, update, who is her right now, as the kids say, or him, who is the gal? Is it Beck?
no,
Is it Brodus?
no, it's Crawley.
It's Crawley. Yeah, I agree. Had to throw that out there. I mean, the other NC State note that people would want us to mention, Carol Lee, the 1-3 win over top 100 player in the world, Diana Schneider. It's just a reminder that Carol Lee's really freaking good, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors, of which Carol Lee being very good is one of them.
Schneider coming, of course, from Mexico earlier in the week to travel, play this match. Yeah, that's really all we have to say on it. All right, other notable results, other things you should know here as we wrap up our coverage of the past week. I have two for you, Jay, and they both involve Kansas. Kansas 4-1 win over Northwestern. They followed up as well with a 4-3 win over ODU on the road. Kansas right now, you look at the ITA rankings, excuse me, they are currently sitting all the way up at number 13. And you know how fondly that 2019 Kansas team still sits in my heart. I just think it's great colors. It's a great color to get back into the college tennis mix. It aesthetically just looks great in contrast to other schools. But man, like this Kansas team, they can freaking play. And again, you look at the results they had this weekend. Ngannou at the one spot. She plays a really good set of matches, 3 sets at both. But obviously, I think she's the real deal. The fact that you can move Tova to the number 2 spot, even though she doesn't get a win, that's a real top 2. And it was the bottom of their lineup that really thrived this weekend. I believe they go 4-0 at the 5 and 6 singles spots. I mean, again, shout out to this Kansas team, Jay. They're what, 9-1 overall to start the year?
I think so. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you know who's loving this? Kansas Surge is Oklahoma and Texas. Both
Yeah,
of
for
these two
sure.
teams who need, other potential ranked wins on that resume and seeing the rest of the Big 12. I mean, you saw this with the ACC, where you have one or two teams continually leading the pack, and then you start to see, other, conference teams emerge. We've seen Iowa State emerge this season, Kansas kind of bubbling up these past few years. Look, I mean, rising tides lift all boats,
Mhm.
and Kansas is certainly one of them.
Yeah, very well said. I do think, again, you look in the mix now, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Oklahoma, Texas. Big 12's coming for your crown, ACC, at least
Yeah.
while these schools are still in the conference. But again, any other results stand out to you from the week? Any other things you think we should know?
I think you went through the list.
Yeah, I think we did hit everyone. Wisconsin got a couple good wins this past weekend. Miami, a 5-2 win over Florida State to kind of get their season back going. I thought Tennessee looked pretty good in their 2 wins. They played Missouri and Arkansas, but like,
Arkansas, yeah.
yeah, I'm buying stock in Tennessee. I think
Yeah.
they could be like a Florida. I think like one of these SEC teams is going to be 15 or 16, and it could be Florida, it could be Tennessee, it could be Vanderbilt. They're probably the
Yeah,
3 fighting it out.
yeah, I was gonna say if tier one SEC is Georgia and A&M, like
Yeah.
there's a few teams in tier two, and it's Florida, Vandy, Tennessee. I think are pretty much your 3 that are competing for that like 14, 15, 16, 17 position.
Yeah. By the way, shout out Kentucky. They got a much needed win on the road at Mississippi State just to get things rocking and rolling. And yeah, I mean, again, I do think across the board, we've got some teams like things are starting to shape out. I do think the SEC also, you're feeling pretty good coming out of weekend number 1. Like, okay, the depth is back, the strength on top is back. And yeah, I think across the board, the rankings are going to look pretty fun as we see all these teams compete over the course of the next month. And with that in mind, let's go next to the rankings, where things stand right now for our Cracked Racquets team coming out of the week. You look at our Cracked Racquets top 10, not a ton of movement, but some movement, certainly following the Pepperdine victories over Michigan and Oklahoma State. They're your biggest winner as they move up to the number 5 spot. It's now North Carolina 1 still, A&M 2, Georgia 3, NC State 4, Pepperdine now 5, Iowa State 6, Michigan 7, Ohio State 8, Auburn 9, Stanford 10. That's interesting to me. That's not going to look exactly the same as my rankings. I believe I had Stanford dropping out of my top 10. I believe, who did I flip above them? I can look right now to what I set West off. Oh, I had Duke now flipped above them because I just thought Duke with the win over Notre Dame. And I think Duke beat Stanford, if memory serves me correct, at the National Indoors in what was that terrible. It was an excellently horrible match is the best way to describe that 4-3 finish. Yeah, I had Duke over Stanford. That's actually my only objection with the rankings.
Yeah, I still had Stanford in, and I had Texas rounding out the top 10.
Okay, so then
I had no Auburn.
Okay, so that's who you left out. Yeah, I left Texas out for now, but they're right on the precipice. When do you want to make the switch to top 16? April 1st? Is that when we start ranking the top 16?
Sure, when we start looking at that Sweet 16 cutoff.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to host the Super Regionals? But yeah, I mean, again, our top 10 looks like this. I'm not sure if we have the ITA graphic or not to see how our top 10 differs with the ITA's top 10, but we do not have it. It's not extraordinarily different. You look right now for the ITA, North Carolina 1, A&M 2, Georgia 3, Ohio State 4, NC State 5, Michigan 6, Auburn and Pepperdine tied for 7, Duke 9, and then Iowa State down at 10. Again, though, Virginia, Texas, Stanford, they're right in the mix there. Man, that race for the top 16 is going to be really fun.
Down really close.
Yeah, down the season's home stretch. Any thoughts on the individual rankings right now? You look at the singles rankings, currently number 1, Fiona Crawley, 2, Freeman, 3, Beck, 4, Sieg, 5, Stoyana, 6, Ma, 7, Ackley, 8, Lee, 9, Alana Smith of NC State, 10, Leah Ma of Georgia. Anything in particular stand out to you?
Yeah, I thought Iona Ackley of South Carolina, who I think quietly has had an excellent season. With Sarah Hamner's injury from the fall, she's been up at the 1 position, been playing extremely well. Transfer from Maryland 2 years ago, comes in to South Carolina, and I definitely don't think she was in the top 10 prior to this week. I forgot to look up what she was 2 weeks ago, but her emergence in the top 10 is well deserved. She's been playing very well at the 1 position for South Carolina.
Well said. One that stuck out to me, we talked Old Dominion earlier, Sasnouskaya at 21. I actually think that's about right. Like, I do think she is top 25 good. I think you look at some of the other individual rankings, Emma Jackson, 24. I think she is that good. Angelica Blake, 29. Again, that feels much more accurate. It's interesting. I see Cayetano right now at 39. I think that's where she should be. Like, we know she's better than that when she's playing her best, but I don't think you can make the case she's clearly been a top 30 player this season. Doubles rankings wise, Chen and Brodus at 1 makes sense. Brown and Miller played them even over the course of the weekend, and so them at 2 doesn't offend me. Crawley Tangillig probably shouldn't be 3 right now, but they had that good of a fall, so they are going to stay there. It's still early. I don't have any particularly strong thoughts. Any final thoughts on the individuals? You ready to look at the week ahead?
Well, just that's the plus or minus, however you want to look at it, about the fall season, right? That those wins in the fall weigh equally, right, to these wins now. You just have to look at Ethan Quinn's singles ranking, right, staying high up in the top 5. Those wins matter. So you talk about Tangillig and Crawley. They had an excellent fall. They'll stay there all season.
Mm-hmm. Well said. By the way, player I'm buying stock in right now, Apple's JC Goldsmith, currently at 90, just because I know you wanted the update there, Jay. But all right, then.
Well,
that's oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it can be tough for her to move up.
I know that is tough. We need some matches at 1 for the stock price, please. All right, let's move on to the week ahead, because it's another fun week of conference play, of spring break trips. You look across the board, Jay. I start with you. What is the matches that have caught your eye?
Well, the match I'm going to spend a little bit more time previewing this week on my podcast is Texas-Oklahoma. Anytime we get a rematch of the national championship, got to go deep on that one. We did get it at indoors, but, I didn't think Oklahoma they definitely didn't play their best. Texas didn't even have their full lineup. Zainalova was out. So I'm very excited to see how that match turns out. It is in Austin. I felt like that match last year against Oklahoma was a little bit where Texas started to turn the page on being the national championship winning caliber team. So that one is the one that I have circled as kind of my match of the week.
There's a bunch of really good ones that start as soon as Friday, right? And I mean, I think you look at Kansas versus Iowa State, like
Yeah.
what's real, what isn't.
Yeah.
Let's find out. Let's roll the balls out that match at Iowa State, Tennessee at Vanderbilt. Like both teams need it if you want to be in that top 16, maybe even pushing towards the top 8 conversation if you're Vanderbilt. You know, again, just looking at the Friday matches, things we're going to cover, and obviously we'll be on ESPN Plus Friday with our SEC and ACC coverage. Shout out to the humble brag. Wake Forest at Florida State. Like, what's up, Florida State? Like, I need to know. And so that's a match I'm really looking forward to because Wake's coming off of a great weekend, right? But of course, you make that trip down to South Florida, anything can happen, or just Florida in general, because I guess Tallahassee's down South Florida. NC State at Miami. I think that catches my eye on Friday, too. That could get a little frisky.
Yeah, Schneider versus Alexa Noel is going to be very frisky. Talk about, hopefully they have a good crowd. That's going to be Alexa Noel throwing all sorts of stuff towards Schneider's way.
Florida at South Carolina is another good one. Georgia, by the way, tough weekend for Vanderbilt. You get Tennessee and Georgia, things getting really real. Mm-hmm. Texas hosts both of the Oklahoma schools, Oklahoma State. My sneaky important match of the week, Jay, because I do have a sneak candidate for you. How about Illinois taking on Northwestern on the women's side? That's a matchup happening 6 p.m. Friday night. Northwestern kind of needs it right now. You look for this Northwestern team. They're currently 72 in the rankings. Illinois 28. I don't think any of us would have anticipated that's where we'd be sitting on March 7th had I asked you in January. That's my sneaky important match of the weekend.
Yeah, that screams like top 4 seeding in Big Ten tournament.
100,000%. But you mentioned, when's that no ad, no problem coming out? What can we expect, again, from you this week?
Thursday morning, we'll be releasing that. We'll definitely do Oklahoma, Texas on the women's side. TBD on the men's side. Put up a poll on the Instagram. I think it's still live, so you can go and vote. I have 3 options on the men's side I want to deep dive on, so go ahead and vote. I'm hoping to attend the Stanford, Texas match on Thursday, assuming it doesn't rain.
Okay, that's a big assumption given what we've seen of late. I'll tell you what, I've brought the rain to California in my recent trips. I will not be in California. I will be in Phoenix. So hopefully, again, maybe that's where the rain will follow. But again, all of that said, that's your look at the week behind in the Division I women's college tennis world. Of course, that's your look at the week ahead as well. We will have coverage of the SEC Thursday, Friday on ESPN Plus and the SEC Network. Of course, for the ACC Friday, Sunday, that's ESPN Plus and the ACC Network, of course, on Sunday on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel. We will also have Big Ten action for all of you college tennis fans as we roll into the start of conference play. Of course, with all that said, a shout out as always to our friends at Ellesse for their support of this show. A shout out as well to our super producer on the ones and twos, Daniel Westoff, who we keep busy, makes all this content possible here at Cracked Racquets. With all of that in mind, Jay, final word goes to you. Any final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to more tennis, no rain, please. Would love to get out there on Thursday. And looking forward to catching more coverage over the weekend. This is the normal slate, so I'm looking forward to all these matches.
I love to hear it. Well, then, with all of that said, for the fantastic John J. Parsons, our super producer Daniel Westoff, our friends at Ellesse, and from all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.